I had mentioned several weeks ago that I was afraid that we would be seeing news about some young people overdosing on painkillers. Just read in the Express News, I guess, this weekend. It was not painkillers. It was in Fredericksburg. A young high school student died. They've arrested 4 people, a 19-year-old, another 18-year-old, for selling it to them. I think it was called Major M or something like that. It's actually a phenylalkylamine, which would sort of maybe be a building block to maybe amphetamines, but it might be someone trying to make a new type of ecstasy or something like that. Talk about these new synthetic drugs that my problem is I always want to follow up on the story and get some autopsy information. What exactly did the young man die of? Was it a heart attack? I mean, because you hear these reports and people throw things out, but it's often not very accurate. And so I can give you the latest information. But a lot of times, they're not very clear about what happened to that young man. But his friend was hospitalized, but he recovered. So obviously, something is out there that you might want to be careful about. I don't know if they combine different things. That's always an issue also. Okay, I'm going to take you to your home page so everybody's up to speed with what I've done with the clicker points and where we're going to go. I talked to a student yesterday in my 11:30 Tuesday, Thursday class. She had never looked at the iClicker folder on her home page, so she didn't know what clicker 1 stood for, clicker 2. I said, please look at the information that I provide for you so that you can see what things mean. So, okay. What I did is I went ahead and we had data from April 4th. Then on, let's see, is this you guys? I had a problem with the 7th and the 9th. That would be last, I guess, Monday and Wednesday. And then I was absent on the 11th. And then we had points this Monday. So I went ahead and gave everybody points for the 7th and the 9th that had a registered clicker. So last week was when I tried on Monday and tried on Wednesday and had a failure message with the software. So I think I got that figured out. And then on Monday, we had a question. So I just gave everybody points, 2 points, if you had a registered clicker for those 2 days. So that gave you a possible total. So everything is worth 2 points. So by Monday, you could have had your total possible of 8 points under clicker 3, which would give you your total of 30. So you could earn 12 points from clicker 1. Those are the points from February. Clicker 2, the points from March. Clicker 3, the points from April. And what I did is when you look at the table that I provide you, it's not going to have the 4th, the April 7th, or the 9th because we didn't really actually ask a question on those days. So you'll see data from April 4th, and then it jumps to the 14th. So if you go back and look at what it says here, it says a total possible of 26. Well, that's because those 2 days last week, I gave everybody 2 points for each day because the software messed up. So that's how you can match that up. So if you have earned your 30 points, you have fulfilled that part of your the course requirement. So you don't need to answer any more clicker questions. I've posted the last quiz, which I actually posted Chapter 9 quiz on drug treatment. And so now, if you look at your point total possible, you should see 300. So you're going to count your top 2 exam scores, exam 1 and exam 2. And for some of you, you're going to want to drop one of those and take the 3rd exam. Then you have your 70 online quiz points, and you have your 30 class participation clicker points. So if you have 270 points already because you did well on your first 2 exams, you've done your clickers, and you've caught up, you've done well on the quizzes, you actually have the points right now. If your points are 270 or above, you will get an A this semester for this class. Okay, given. You don't have to take the 3rd exam because when you don't take it, that becomes the one that's automatically dropped. In a spreadsheet, that I have in your grade book, the formula is the top 2 exams of the 3. So that 0 on the final, obviously, is the one that's dropped. Now, if you have a bad exam or you missed an exam, you're going to want to take that 3rd exam, the final, do well, so one of your other scores will be dropped. Okay, the top 2 exam scores. Just want to let people know where they stand. If you right now have 240, you've earned a B for the class. So all this is outlined in the syllabus, if you take a look at that and what your grade cutoffs are. So I will remind people, I'll go to the calendar here. You always want to check your calendar when you want to see what things are happening. Under Tools, so you can look at this at your leisure, but I just want to remind people, Monday, the 14th, was you could reach 30 points if you hadn't missed any. And then today, we have a 2-point, that you can have 2 points here, 2 points here on Friday, 2 points next Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. 2, 4, 6. You can earn 10 clicker points if you're missing any. So I'm trying to be fair and generous with you. At the very beginning, I said, if your battery dies on your clicker or you forget it that day, you don't have to panic. There'll be extra sessions that you could fill in to make sure you get your 30. Now, if you have your 30 and you keep responding, you're not going to get any extra points. It's just 10% for class participation. So if you keep answering, you'll see that your total keeps staying to 30. So what I'll do is, as I ask questions, you'll see your points from these extra sessions added on to your clicker 3 points. So you'll see those points going up, maybe up to 10 if you get all the extra points. You'll see 10 added on to your clicker 3 points, and until you hit 30, and then you can't earn any more. Now, if you look here, I know some people are worried that I haven't maybe added 3 points to their top exam score because they did an evaluation. There's a lot of people doing the online evaluations. They officially close on next Monday, the 21st. The information I got when I asked them why I'm not receiving names yet from students on a list that ASAP provides that have completed evaluations, they said, well, they're going to do a batch release maybe at the end of this week and then a final batch release on the 21st. So they're not just releasing names as the evaluations dribble in. So I will keep checking as soon as they release lists of students for any of my sections that have completed an online course evaluation. You'll see 3 points added to your highest exam score. If your 2 exam scores are the same, then it's going to go to one of those. So, and then finally, I'm opening up all the quizzes. So this is your last quiz here. I just went ahead and left it open until the final closure of the 27th. And you want to open it up, then close it on the 20th, and then reopen it. But starting on the 20th, all online quizzes will be open until April 27th at 11:59. They will all close. If you miss that deadline, I can't help you. So people immediately started emailing me. Whenever you give people a large class a deadline, people will miss it. I couldn't do the quizzes. I was out of town. I forgot the deadline, things like that. So what I want, instead of trying to individually open them, they're all reopened from the 20th. That is about 1 a.m., probably, what is the 20th? Sunday morning till 11:59, Sunday evening, the 27th. Now, if you have used up all your attempts, well, that's a problem because, 3 attempts to answer 5 questions where I tell you where the answers are in your book, I can't help you there. You've warned people not to rush and just try guessing things and things like that. But if you have completed one, but your top score is 4 or 3, and you have attempts left, there's 3 attempts for each quiz, yeah, go back in and answer them all correctly, and you will see your point total for that exam go to 5, your highest score there. Okay. So, but 3 attempts for 5 questions where I tell you where the answers are. If you blew those 3 attempts, that's kind of bad strategy on your part. I see a lot of people trying to do them at 11:58, and they close at 11:59. Not a good thing to do. So I'm a fair professor. I want you to succeed. I wanted you to succeed when I first met you, that first day of class. I've laid out for you what to expect. I never try and have surprises. You knew up front 270 was your goal if you want to get the A. Your sources of points were clickers, quizzes, and your top 2 exams. So at this point, everybody should have a pretty good idea where they're at. If they've got a bad exam or they've missed an exam, you can kind of calculate what you need to get on that 3rd exam, the final, to get you the point total you need. So it's easy math. You're college students. You can first attempt it on your own before you come to me and say, can you tell me what I need to get on the final to get an A? You attempt it first, okay? You know, people are getting so passive. Just tell me what it is. Tell me how many points. I don't want to write anything down. Look at the syllabus. You'll be able to figure out what you need on the 3rd exam to get the points you need after you drop your low score. And if you have a problem, then come talk to me. But first, work it out on your own and say, is this correct? Now, are there questions? I know some people, I've actually had in all 3 sections, I have athletes that are volleyball players, track players, golfers, baseball players, tennis. I've been trying to keep track of all the events you guys have gone to so you get your points. Not all information is as organized as it might be, but I will get back to that. If you still feel you're missing a point because you were at an excused event, I think there was a trip to Florida for some competitive cheering or something, you know, I will make sure that you get all the points you deserve. I want to help you with that. So hopefully some of you have come to my office, although yesterday, I talked to 2 sections yesterday, said please come to my office. A lot of people said they would, but nobody did. So now's the time to come talk to me so you can look at what's going on. Don't be running around the week of finals saying, I never got these points or something like that. Clear all that stuff up so it's less stressful for you. All right? All right. So check out the information that we have here for you. Well, that clock is off. All right, so we've been talking about that first big group of hallucinogens that are indoles. If we look here, talk about LSD, the big daddy of all hallucinogens. Talked about its history, what the doses are, the only drug that you get into that microgram range. Gave you some information on how it works. Everybody should know it works through a serotonin receptor, the 5-HT2A receptor. Tolerance is rapid for LSD. If you do it 3 days in a row, you lose your hallucinations. Physical effects like stimulants, mental effects. Know this word, synesthesia. Means mixing of the senses. That's what this drug, these hallucinogens can produce. We talked about bad trips, mental illness, and flashbacks. Okay. So that's the main indole, but there are others. The mushroom psilocybin, there are mushroom species that produce psilocybin and psilocin that also are indole psychedelics. They have the indole ring that serotonin does. I'll show you some pictures of those mushrooms. These have been used by a number of tribes in Central America. And United States, we learned about these mushrooms in 1957 when Life magazine had a front page cover story on seeking the magic mushroom. And it was Albert Hoffman who was an author on that, the guy who first synthesized LSD. About 75 species of mushrooms can produce psychoactive compounds like this. The dose can range to 10 to 60 milligrams. Okay, check that out. We're back up to milligram amounts. Any drug you take, aspirin, ibuprofen, acetaminophen, you're going to see it's milligram amounts. That's normal for a drug. This, again, is more normal, milligram amounts. LSD was the only one that we were in that microgram amount, really, really small amounts. So we think that these chemicals stimulate that 5-HT2A receptor, but they don't do it as efficiently, so you need more of the drug. The effects are sensory distortion, similar to LSD, but a shorter duration. So the overall take-home message about psilocybin, if you look here, you might have some initially nauseous changes, Visceral sensations means your organs, your gut might feel kind of strange. Then you start having the sight, hearing, taste, touch, and altered states of consciousness similar to LSD. But people don't get those extreme dissociation out-of-body hallucinations, and people don't seem to have the bad trips. So psilocybin has actually been, some people feel that it must do something else besides that serotonin receptor, because about 95% of people who have experienced it have a long-lasting positive memory of it. They feel that it enlightened them. Okay? So there's some scientists who think that psilocybin might be interacting with a couple other receptors, one for oxytocin, which is a hormone that allows you to bond with other people. And so there's some research going on now with psilocybin. I think I mentioned I tried shrooms once. I was camping at Los Maples. And I remember a handful of dried mushrooms. You know, I guess they're mushrooms. I'm not a big fan of that. Little nausea. It was a beautiful night anyway. We were camping because it was a new moon. There was no moon, so the stars were incredible. And I remember, you know, mild effects. I'm not sure I got that big of a dose. So remember, you're going to have kind of a handful of dried mushrooms. So if someone says, here, just take this little piece of mushroom and you're going to have it. You know, you'll experience it. Could be just HEB mushrooms that they purchased, dried, and put a drop of LSD on. Okay, so it's not, you're not going to just take a little fraction of a mushroom. And of course, you should never go out and harvest mushrooms unless you have your guide with you or someone who is guiding you knows his mushrooms or her mushrooms very well. People die every year potentially picking mushrooms to put in food or to think they're shrooms, and these mushrooms contain toxins that shut down your liver and kidneys within about 5 hours of ingestion. So you just can't go out and pick mushrooms without really knowing what you're getting here. So people can get kits sometimes, but again, be careful. Now there's more indoles than any other. Ibogaine from an African shrub, morning glory seeds that Native Americans in North America consumed. These are compounds that have an indole ring, but they may not be as well known. Everybody asks me about DMT. First 2 weeks of semester, I usually have a couple young men say, are you going to talk about DMT? And they're all excited about it. It's had a lot of play from some books that were put out years ago called Food of the Gods, that this was some kind of a special hallucinogen. It was discovered in neurons, I think maybe in the 80s. People say, oh, wow, we have an hallucinogen in our brain. Big deal. You know, you also have painkillers like endorphins. You have cannabinoids like endocannabinoids from marijuana. Your brain has all kinds of chemicals that alter your perception of reality. I'm not that impressed that they found it. If you look at the structure of it, dimethyltryptamine could be just a byproduct in the synthesis or degradation of serotonin or other intermediaries. So I guess now there is a synthetic version that's available, so that's what these guys are asking me about. Some little crystal, should they do it, should they not do it? Boy, you know, what can I say? I've never done it myself. My view is always be safe, be secure, be careful, you know, moderation. The natural DMT, there's lots of plants in South America. One of the ones that I've seen are these yopo beans from a shrub. So the shaman, the medicine man who does consume them, dries them and grinds them up. They almost look like garbanzo beans or hummus when you dry it. You can't ingest it orally because the DMT is broken down in the stomach by stomach acid. So they usually will have a long hollow stick and they snort it. And then they will experience the hallucinations. One person I've talked to who has done it said it was very different from LSD, that the tribesmen feel that it pulls a curtain back to reveal the other spirits in the world. But these people feel that every animal, every plant, everything in the world has another spiritual side to it. And when they're doing this, you can see those spirits now and interact to it. When you're not doing the drug, it's like a curtain comes down and we can't see it. So this person said, yeah, we didn't really get a chance to talk about it much, but he felt it was pretty different. So the ceremonies might involve a shaman who is doing something from a tribe. Young men have to go through this ceremony to become a man. I guess boys have to do it. They make them have fiery insects bite them. They make them undergo pain. And then they snort some of this DMT compound, and they have to go out and find their animal spirit. So if you watch the movie, really old movie now, The Emerald Forest, Caucasian boy gets lost and is adopted by a tribe in the Amazon. So he kind of goes through all those ceremonies. It's a pretty cool movie, an old movie, I think. But that's what's going on there. In urban cities in South America, they may just have it kind of chopped up already. They might smoke it, some snort it. Smoking it, very brief hallucination, maybe 30 minutes. People say it's a businessman's trip, very short. Don't worry about the desert toad. People have talked about it having a DMT-type compound. And then finally, yage is a vine. You chop it up and ferment it, and you have this dreamy experience for about 10 hours. Now, 10 hours is pushing it. Apparently, it's this dreamlike state is for that idea that you think you're in a dream. Is this reality? Am I dreaming? You get really nauseous initially, but there are people that say that lasts for about 15 minutes, then you experience this dream state. So there's actually tourism, drug tourism in Central America and South America. You go, you stay in a hut, and they bring you the yage, and you drink it, and you have this experience. So I don't know what happens with here, God knows where, if you do have a bad experience, but there have been some articles written about it. All right, I actually asked you this question on Monday about the next group, the phenylalkylamines. Totally different structure from the indoles, but interestingly, similar hallucinations in some ways. These drugs look more like adrenaline, your natural energy hormone, and amphetamines. But they have more than just stimulant effects. So the first one, this should say peyote cactus. So this is a little confusing for people. Mescaline is the chemical, and it's made by the peyote cactus. Sorry, it's kind of, some people call it peyote. So this is the active drug in the peyote in San Pedro. Again, South Texas, northern Mexico. Tribes have used them for hundreds of years. And I will show you a picture here of what they look like. Okay, this is from the latest edition. This is a little introduction to Chapter 6, which does contain information on the active ingredients of cannabis sativa and cannabis indica, sometimes referred to as the marijuana plant. So this is an advertisement for a vapor room, where people use vaporizers to inhale THC. So the whole thing about smoking marijuana is that smoke does not contain the carcinogens that tobacco smoke does, but it's still smoke. It's got heat, it's got some tar that always occurs when you burn plants, little particulate matter that's there. So chronic smokers of these unfiltered cigarettes or joints or pipes may feel some irritation to the lungs. So people say, well, why about, instead of burning it, we just heat the plant material to a temperature that will vaporize it in what is called a vaporizer. So you have two metal plates. You can take a bud or some portion of the marijuana plant and press it between the plates. That heats up with a current, but it is under a higher pressure, humidified environment, so nothing catches fire. But the plant material reaches a temperature where the THC in the resin of the plant goes from a solid state to a vapor state. So it gives off, the chamber contains vaporized THC. So they collect this maybe in a clear bag, and then you inhale this vapor. So it doesn't have any smoke appearance. It's just clear. And so this is an advertisement where people are going to be I guess, vaporizing or buying vaporizers. This address here, Haight, is one of Haight and Ashbury. It was a very famous intersection in San Francisco for the drug years of the 60s. The author of your book used to have a drug clinic near that intersection. He's since moved his clinic to Portland. Also have a well-known drug culture there. Okay, these are the groups we talked about. 1 is the indoles, 2, the phenylalkylamines, 3, anticholinergics, 4, ketamines, kind of a catch-all, salvia divinorum, and then finally he This is Albert, nerdy-looking guy. He went on to try every hallucinogen he could because he wanted to. He really still thought that maybe there was a way to understand how the brain works. So talk about brilliant synthetic chemist. First one to ever experience LSD. Then he did psilocybin, and I'll talk about he had an experience with mescaline also. Usually tribes would allow him to join because he was so famous for his discovery of LSD. This is a copy of the cover page for those CIA experiments. The code word is ultra. It's been 60 years, so they've been declassified. Pretty scary stuff in here where they're trying to use LSD for mind control or truth serum, unconventional warfare. Again, giving a drug like LSD to people who don't know they're getting it is very bad. I mean, there were a lot of bad fallout from that. Okay, here's Timothy Leary, professor of psychology and philosophy at Harvard. LSD was not illegal at the time that he was very interested in it. So on Friday afternoons, he and several professors would take some LSD-25 that Sandoz had sent them with an idea what the dose should be and experienced it to see if it would lead to some enlightened state. He once took a dose so big he didn't talk for 3 days. He just sat on the roof, and I don't know what he was doing, but didn't talk. Came out of it and went, wow. But we'll find out it's kind of hard to translate what he felt. Here he is looking at his hand. I don't know what he's high on now. He was fired from Harvard or released because they felt he was telling students to drop out of school and take drugs. He says he never really, that was a misquote. These are some confiscated items that are thought to contain LSD. So remember, it's a tiny, tiny amount, microgram. You can't weigh it to distribute it, so you put it in solution so you know how much is in a drop. So you put a drop on little pills that you can make. There was an orange pill in San Antonio, I think, in the late 80s called Orange Sunshine. It was a little orange pill. Apparently had some LSD on it. You can put it on powder and then put that powder in a capsule. These little microdots I don't think you see anymore. And most common now is it's put on sheets of blotter paper. So this is like a postage stamp, and you tear off a stamp, and each of those stamps has 1 drop or 1 dose. So the person you're buying it from will tell you, well, you need 2 tabs or 3 tabs to calculate the dose that you would like. You have no idea. You have to trust this person. But it's just a way to distribute the chemical because, again, you can't weigh it out. It's such a small amount. So all these people just had different symbols. I don't think the symbol necessarily meant that much. Okay, this is a species of mushroom that does produce. Actually, the mushroom produces psilocybin, and then it's in your brain. It's processed to psilocin, which is the true hallucinogen. So people have told me in South Texas, if you're out in an area and there's cow patties where cows have been through and defecated, rains, these little mushrooms will often pop up around there. I thought I saw some on campus the other day. I was walking. In fact, it was right out here. I went, what are those? They look like that picture. You know. She says there's psychedelic mushrooms on campus. I don't know. I found a joint one time, fully rolled, really fat. It's like, whoa, that's a nice find, you know. Poor guy was probably going, where did I put it, man? Where did I put it? Oh, tearing his clothes off. In my hat, in my jacket, in my backpack. Nope, it's gone. This is some mushrooms that were grown from a kit. So mushrooms are pretty basic. You get the little spores, add water, and it fills up the container. So again, I don't know if this is possible anymore. I haven't really delved into it that much. This is a pretty famous book by Aldous Huxley, Doors of Perception. There were a lot of scientists, philosophers, heavy thinkers who wanted to experience these drugs to see how it might affect our perception of the universe and reality. So he was looking at mescaline, a vivid, arresting, and first-hand description of the effects of mescaline, a little-known drug of unusual qualities. Pretty cool little subtitle there. This is the peyote cactus. So this is what contains the mescaline. So it's a pretty low cactus, a small cactus. And like any cactus in the spring, when it rains, it can get little bulges and little flowers on it. You can actually cut this off right at the ground and then slice this into what are called peyote buttons. So that's what Native Americans, if you're Cherokee, and yes, Cherokee I know, and 2 other tribes in this area are allowed to harvest this for their ceremonies. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. It's legal for them. This is a little picture supposedly representing maybe a rave, we'll talk about methylene dioxymethamphetamine, a type of, it doesn't cause sensory hallucinations that much, but it causes big mood changes. It has a stimulant side effect, so people like it when they're at clubs to dance and all that. These are capsules of methylene dioxymethamphetamine or ecstasy that have been, I guess they were confiscated at a rave party. Turns out that they don't really contain much. Most of them do not contain ecstasy. These are just little stamps you can put on your pills. Some of them had caffeine, some of them had amphetamine, but not ecstasy. So in Europe, and perhaps here in the United States, you can get a little kit where you can take a little sliver of the pill and test it to see what you're getting, which would be smart. In Europe, their approach is harm reduction rather than legal approaches to drug use by young people. So one of the things that happened is that there was a big bust. A Dutch trafficker was busted with, I think, 3 million doses of ecstasy. He went back, he was extradited to the US, and he's now serving 20 years in prison. So that kind of dried up the source of most of the ecstasy in the United States. It was coming from overseas. So for a while, there wasn't a lot of it available. There were a lot of fake preparations. Now some labs in the US have caught up, so they are now making ecstasy locally, and it's now available. People apparently are getting doses of it. Somebody told me about a new street named Molly for this real ecstasy. Well, there's only one methylene dioxymethamphetamine, so you either get it or you don't, but I imagine dose is important. And because it has stimulant effects, there have been a few deaths, we'll talk about that, from hyperthermia, people getting overheated. Talk a little bit about ketamine, an animal anesthetic that people have partied with, calling it Special K. This is his cousin, phencyclidine, or PCP, or angel dust. Big headquarter in Los Angeles, hence the term angel dust. These are all illegally prepared. There's no legal use for PCP. So these are just liquids. People dip things in to smoke it, powders. Sometimes it's pressed into a pill. I think this is Jimson weed. We'll talk about that. Salvia divinorum. Heard about this real quickly about 20 years ago. Dr. Armstrong is selling this stuff at Planet K. They send it, they bring me some. I said, no, that's okay. Don't bring me drugs. Okay, this is about getting into marijuana. Okay, we can stop there. Somebody sent me cat one time from their work site with an oil company in Saudi Arabia. Probably not a good idea. All right, so what I want to do here is talk a little bit about this only natural. So now we're into the second group, which is mescaline from the peyote cactus. Totally different structure. It's been used Central and South America. The Catholic Church, when they were really getting into the converting the tribes in Central and South America, they looked at these drugs as sinful, adulteration, so they really tried to stamp it out. But it is still part of the culture of some tribes. So in North America, the Comanche, Kiowa, and Utes still use mescaline ceremonies. So what they do is they build a special teepee, really tall one. They have a circle with a fire. They chant, and they drum and put themselves in kind of a trance. Then they take either the mescaline buttons or a tea where the buttons have been heated, and they begin their religious ceremony. Just elders do it, or young men, again, getting promoted from boy to man. So I did have a Comanche 1/4 in my class one time who went through a ceremony there. So some Indian tribesmen have been arrested because, as you may get a pattern here, in the United States, people were very fearful of these drugs because of the bad reputation of LSD. So psilocybin was quickly put on Schedule 1. Mescaline quickly put on Schedule 1, not really based on science, but a fear that it would corrupt young people and harm their brains. So I went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said these people have used this compound for religious ceremonies for a very long time. It's part of their culture. So they're protected by the Constitution, the right to practice your religion. So it is legal for them. They harvest about 2 million buttons a year. So you may at some point see some being gathered in South Texas. I think ranchers, they let them know we're coming on to gather some. They have a card that says, I am a shaman or this member of this tribe. That's why I'm collecting these buttons. UTSA ID doesn't work. You get busted if a local sheriff sees you. So they have 2 million is quite a few. There's actually some concerns that they may have to protect some of the species because they're being over-harvested. So these buttons are collected, and they have formed a church, the Native American Church of North America. If you look at the effects, 7 to 8 buttons. So some of these cacti, that would be a fairly large button there. Horribly bitter. If you when it's fresh, it's horrible. When it's dried, it's horrible. People put it in hot water to extract it and then drink that. It's horrible. I have not tried it, but people have said, oh my gosh. So people say it has a long-lasting effect similar to LSD, colorful visions and hallucinations. So the tribesmen usually do it to time travel, talk to ancestors, have a young man go to manhood, see his animal spirit, or something like that. The problem is people don't party with mescaline very much because for the first 15, 20 minutes, you are projectile vomiting. So the tribesmen have bowls there that they can use. Some of them kind of overcome it. It's just part of the experience. But most Caucasians, Albert Hoffman said he thought he was going to die, but finally after 20 minutes, the vomiting slowed down and he experienced these hallucinations. So that's not something that people, teenagers or young people, want to really experience. People have talked about this crystals of mescaline apparently out there that people are selling that are synthetic. You know, if you're not vomiting intensely after you consume it, it's not mescaline. So be careful. Again, these are things people mislabel a lot. Oh, this was liquid mescaline, or this is synthetic psilocybin. Those things are hard to synthesize. It's not like meth. So you want to be careful if someone's trying to sell that. So again, they get into this state, even before they take the drug, and they feel like they get guidance and understanding. So very different from when young people, Caucasians or in our culture, use it. Not necessarily Caucasians, but in non-tribes, young people. Now, the other phenylalkylamine is a weird group. Look at all these names here. These also have a phenylalkylamine structure. They don't act anything like mescaline, the natural compound. They're all synthetic. They're all variants of the amphetamine molecule. So MDA was an early one. This is a chemical name, methylene dioxyamphetamine. I think this came out when I was in college. Then its kind of daughter came out, MDMA, which is 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine. So you can see they've got the amphetamine molecule there. Street name ecstasy, E, all kinds of different things. Now I think Molly. So the thing is, you would think, well, it's just an amphetamine. It produces a very strong mood changes, and people often combine it with other drugs. They call it a club drug, where they want to go out, they dance, they get together with their friends, but not hallucination. So even though it's in this chapter, there's obviously something different in this structure from mescaline, although mescaline can have mild stimulant effects. So initially this drug was not illegal. It wasn't on any DEA list, so if you were caught with it, they checked their list. It's not illegal. The DEA has gotten around this by now saying, if you're caught with a drug, and we run it through our mass spec, and it doesn't match any of our profiles, but we know you're selling it as a drug for people to get high, we're still going to bust you. So it's sort of like you can't just keep changing the molecule to say it's legal. So anyway, nobody really knew much about it except some psychiatrists use small amounts with patients who seemed to have not able to break through their neurosis. These people were often very unhappy, and under the influence of ecstasy, they suddenly were able to open up and discuss things that they hadn't before. Then it sort of got out into the club, and a couple young girls died, maybe related to hypothermia. Once that happens, police are called, it goes on Schedule 1. So on Schedule 1, it became 1988, using that drug amendment that they now have. I think 88, it was illegal. So I came down to Texas in 83. 85, I did it in a club in Dallas, and people said, oh, you got to try this. The club was intense, the ecstasy was intense, stayed up all night, drank too much. But I understand, a lot of stimulant effects, and also this mood change called empathy. So what you feel is this immediate trust of everybody, and it's caused by the serotonin. That's the mechanism under this. So when it was legal, people were cranking it out. Then that dried up. The European supply dried up. 2006, that Dutch smuggler was busted. If you look at 2006, 1.3 high school students said they used it on a monthly basis. It always scares me. Now that's been reduced. This is dated. It was actually peaked in 2000. Talk about a paper that came out about possible neurotoxicity. And you don't have to worry about this. It was just an old street term. Using a tablet or capsule, 75 to 125 milligrams. If it's available, $10. If it's not, if it's in short supply, 40 or higher. Although still people say there's a lot of things there that are not really ecstasy. So what are you talking about? We first do physical and then mental effects. Feels like a stimulant. Starts to occur after 30 minutes. Increased heart rate, respiration. You know the program here. Sweating, hyperactivity. I mentioned bruxism, which I could have said when I talked about amphetamines. It's a way for people to get rid of this excess energy that stimulants produce. They tend to clench their jaws and grind their teeth. That's bruxism. Some people have sore jaws the next day. It's a stimulant effect, not anything unusual there. And some people, what happens is that the mood change is what people take it for, the feeling of empathy, feeling good about themselves, their friends, but you get tolerant to this pretty fast. So people start taking high doses, and basically they're getting big stimulant effects. So people that have had problems have had malignant hyperthermia. You're in a place, you're dancing, you're not drinking enough, your body temperature gets over 104, keeps climbing, and you're going to go in, you're going to have a problem. You can die. Water toxicity, where some people wanted to avoid the hyperthermia and they just kept drinking water, and they actually diluted the electrolytes in their brain. And some people have had seizures. This would be like an epileptic seizure because maybe of overexcitation in the brain. Lots of people have used it, have not had negative effects, but it's always, the more people that use a drug, you have to be careful. All right, what are these mental effects? Give it its name. 3 to 4 hours, perfect for a club drug. Happiness, empathy. What is empathy? It's the opposite of paranoia. When I'm paranoid, I don't trust you. When I'm empathetic, sure I trust you. You're my bud. Yes. Well, it's like a little love fest for all your friends. You're such a nice person. You're such a good person. Whereas off the next day, it is a drug-induced effect. Now, some people have never felt that kind of empathy, and they have had lasting effects, but a lot of times when it wears off, you often feel kind of depressed the next day. So people feel the self-awareness, self-esteem, clarity, some mild distortions if you mix it with marijuana. How does it work? It causes a massive release of serotonin from the axon terminals, from the synaptic vesicles. So you remember serotonin, axons branch all over and can interact with all parts of the brain. Suddenly, they all dump their serotonin at once. So that's the elevated mood and the activity. Talk about that neurotoxicity on Friday. But right now, get you ready for your question if you want to get yourself set up. People are concerned about possible effects on serotonin. I will start there on Friday, and then before we go on to the anticholinergics. So I'm going to ask you a question about this drug that we just talked about. See if you remember what I said. This is an extra session for you to earn 2 points if you didn't get all your 30. Just opening the program now. Problem there. Well, that little error I thought I fixed